Now you can also see back here, right? You've also got different you've got different types of synth. Now I won't go into sync modulation on this one because that's just not useful. But you've got what's called a wavetable on here as well. Wavetables are like very popular at the moment, particularly because Serum, which is like a very leading synth, basically is, you know, has for the most part is using wavetables. And what it basically does is it models other, whereas in a normal synth, sorry, in a subtractive analog synth, you've got like square wave, triangle wave, all that stuff. Wavetable basically models the wave on other stuff, which means that there's essentially infinite different types of wave that you can have. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, if you're new to this, go into Wavetable, try some of these out, see what they sound like. They will sound different to your analog basic sounds like square, triangle, sine, that kind of stuff. So it's another tool that they're giving you here. You can see the other stuff is the same. Like pretty much everything apart from the oscillator on this is the same, right down to the chorus effect. The only advantage you've got here is that you can basically go in and choose what you want in here as your sound. So I could go in and say like, what's morphing harmonics? You see, that's not what a square or a triangle sounds like. Resonance sweep. Another thing about a wavetable is that it changes over time as well, which is nice. So anyway, that's in there. The other thing is what's called FM as well. Now this is getting into, again, like another level of synthesis, but an FM synth basically uses two oscillators, but it puts one across the other, so it combines two. But the point with this is that you've got another tool in here for free, so you're not just dealing with like this kind of like wooden old boring granddad synth. You've also got like table and FM in there as well, wavetable and FM if you want to use anything like that going forward. So yeah, my kind of like sales pitch with this is, don't write off retrosynth because it is a really good tool. The other thing that we were talking about earlier, just to kind of spice your synth sounds up, was arpeggiators. And arpeggiators are really good tools. And there are many MIDI tools to help you work with synths. And you can do this with any MIDI effect in Logic. But if you haven't done it before, check out your MIDI effects. Here's your signal path in your channel, goes top to bottom. So, for example, you would start with whatever your instrument is, and it goes down for your audio effects for your sends. But you'll notice that there's actually one before the instrument, and you might think, how can there be something before the instrument? Well, what this is doing is this is basically informing your triggers for the instrument. So your MIDI effects, of which there are about 8 there, include an arpeggiator. So if I turn on the Logic arpeggiator, and I press a note, you will notice that it will keep playing that same note at the rate of a 16th, because that's what the rate's set to. So if I play a chord in the bass, I've now got like a moving bass line there. I could also like set it to triplet, for example. And if you've got like something moving in 4 over the top of that, so let's just try and like kind of like give an example with this, right? Oh no, didn't want to do that. Sorry, 1 second. That's what happens when you're too hasty with deleting channels. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to bring in like a drama track in, and we'll just set it to like electronic. Doesn't really matter what it is for the minute. Okay, cool. So like arpeggiators are a good way of letting you experiment with other rhythms as well. So obviously if you're playing in 16s, that's kind of instantly just like giving you motion and energy. Now I'm just in 4s across it. Oh, sorry, in 8s even. If I go to 8 triplet, I'm going to start to get a bit of bounce. Or 8 dotted, it's going to give me a different feel as well. Where are we? Sorry. Gives you that kind of bounce structure to it. So you can actually use your arpeggiator to like just program in rhythms as well if you're trying to get like something like that in time. You could use note repeat as well, but this is a nice way of doing it. The other thing you can do with this is you can play a chord and do the same thing as you did in Alchemy. So it'll go up, down. Let's make it faster so it doesn't sound ridiculous. So I could do that kind of same thing if I wanted to. Cool. So, and the other thing that I just mentioned about MIDI effects, I've done it again, haven't I? Deleted the wrong channel. Is that you've got so a handy one for beginners in here as well is transposer. Now, the reason I mentioned transposer is that if you're not a confident pianist, so I'm a guitarist first and foremost, right? So all my theory, understanding of intervals, all that stuff in my head is on a guitar. So whenever I'm playing another instrument, which I normally can do because I have like a good understanding of like, you know, harmony, theory, that kind of stuff, I am normally kind of working it back from guitar theory, right? But what you'll probably figure out is that like to do production on any level, you're pretty much going to need to play keys at some point, right? Like, you're not going to get away from that one. And one of the hardest things with synths or whatever it is, if you're trying to find like something that fits, is trying to play the keyboard and be like, okay, well, which notes are in this key? So it's fine when you're in A minor or C major, because if you know much about theory, those are all the white keys basically. But as soon as you start moving out of that into, you know, even the simple ones like G, for example, which only has one black key, as it were, like then basically you're still having to like know what those scales are to be able to get something that fits. Now, what transposer does is it allows you to play in one key and it will transpose it into another key for you. And the great thing about this is normally if you're not a confident player or you're not a confident, rephrase that, you're not a confident pianist, then what you can do is you can figure out what your key is. So if it was, say, G major, and you wanted to play in C major, then what you can do is go, okay, I'm going to move down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 semitones, or up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I can either push this up 5 semitones or down 7 semitones. So if I play the same part, and I now push it up, I'm still playing the same notes on the keyboard. It's moving them around for me. So this will help you if you're trying to find, like, if you're trying to play parts on synths or whatever, and you don't want to have to constantly go back and write in the MIDI, and you actually want to play it, but you just want to be able to play it in a key that you know, normally A minor or C major. This will help you to do that. Cool. So, oh, dog's gone mad. See, he agrees. All right, cool. So the last thing we're going to do with this is just, I just said earlier I would talk to you a little bit about how to make your sounds a little bit more real, or a little bit like a bit more like how you would play an analog synth. One of the things with analog synths that are a real joy to play, but also one of the reasons that they sound so like natural and fluid, is because people do play them like instruments. So like when you're playing it, you're not just playing like the keys, you're also playing like the filters, you're playing like the modulations, modulations being something like LFO, for example. You're playing, you know, you could play with the glide, you could play with the way that the mix between the oscillators. You know, there's all this stuff that you can like bring out in a synth that you can't really do if you've just got like a static thing. And I think one of the things that like software, but in particular like software synths, leaves you prone to is just kind of assuming that like the synth should just be static. So like if I make a synth sound or I go to a preset and I'm like, okay, synth bass. Sorry, if you didn't know presets are up here. So use a default. And then you can choose some sounds down here. Like that's my sound, right? But you might just be like, okay, well that's what I'm going to play with, and you will just play a part in like that. Whereas what you're more likely to do on a real synth is actually play with the tone and the sound design of the part over time. So what I propose with this that you should do is you should use automation to modulate your synth sounds over time. So an example of this would be like, let's just take a quick recording of a part, right? I'm just going to make one up. Absolute shit. Let me start again. Sorry. What What's wrong with me? Long day. Cool, we'll start there. Okay, so what you could do now is you could start moving this using automation, bringing in a different tone. What happens if we glide it? Then open up your amp. So you can see I'm moving the tone like ever so slightly each time, and it's basically just giving me like a little bit more of my tone, like every single time it comes round. Classic one, opening your filter up. So if you're not used to using automation, here's a quick intro to automation which you can take away and play with. So if you press A, you go into automation mode, and what you can do is you can start to write in automation using the touch or the latch settings. Now for this kind of thing I would recommend using latch, because what that will do is, so the difference between touch and latch is if I pull this up on touch and let go, it will snap back to the middle position, whereas with latch, if I pull it up and let go, it will stay there. And that's kind of more what I want to do here, because I want to like work with my sound over time, right? So I'm going to just switch it to latch, and because I'm on a loop, it's going to change each time it comes round. So I'm just going to make small adjustments, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this loop up. I'm just going to kind of play with this over time and just make changes as I would if I were playing a real synth, and it should just allow me to design my part better. So I'm going to start small and I'm going to build it up. Bring my filter in, my envelope. Okay, so now I'm going to go for a softer sound. Bit more of a janky kind of thing. So you can feel how I'm just changing it over and over again, right? So one idea here would be, you can see that everything that I've done there has been written in automation. Didn't do play with the resonance, cut off, glide, that kind of stuff. It's all being written in. And then if I had a part that I really liked that I've like automated over time, obviously in a real track you might be playing along to the track to make sure it actually felt right. You can then convert this to audio and just treat it as a stem, rather than keeping it in MIDI. And that's kind of truer to how a synth, like an analog synth, would be played if you're recording it in audio, because you're not able to just constantly go back and make changes on it. Like, you've got to commit. So I guess that's what I'm saying, is maybe just try and think of it less like a static software piece of software, and think of it more like an instrument that you can play over time with automation, to make something that like moves and feels different at different points in the track, because that's how you get something that feels really interesting and feels really natural. So yeah, I think we'll leave it there. The very last thing that I realized that I didn't mention earlier was what is resonance. Look, I just realized that I didn't do that. So you can see here there's a little resonance dial on my filter. What resonance is basically a boost at the point of the cutoff filter. So if you're cutting off at, in this case, 400 hertz, then I can boost at 400 hertz. And that basically produces like an OTT version of that filter. So if gives you quite a house kind of sounding like sound. See the difference? So yeah, that's just food for thought, but I thought I'd add that in because I mentioned at the beginning, and I promised I would. So yeah, I've been kind. This has been how to use some ideas of how to use synths in Logic, and which is on Garnish TV. Garnish TV runs every day from all over the world with all different instructors from one of our many different sites. So there's schools in America, we've got schools in the UK, and we're soon to have schools in Europe as well. So yeah, if you want any more information, just go to our website, garnishmusicproduction.com, and thanks for joining us.